So we have studied factoring trinomials where a does not equal 1. We haven't really studied it, but we've practiced it with the guess and check method. And the guess and check method works very well when a and c are both prime. But if a and c are not both prime, the guess and check method can be pretty difficult, and it's more kind of luck as to whether you guess the right one or not. Some people are really good at guessing the right one, and they always get it. Some people get frustrated. So I'm going to teach you another method today on how to factor it using something other than guess and check. This method is called splitting the middle term. Another way that sometimes it's called the AC method. So if this video is not helpful or you need another video, you can go to YouTube and you can search for AC method, factoring by the AC method, or factoring by splitting the middle term, and there are bunches of videos out there. So this is definitely not the only video that you can use. But let's go through a couple of examples together. First of all, let's take a look at our possibilities. Because if we have ax squared plus bx plus c, and if a is 1, so here's an example, x squared plus 9x plus 18. If we have something like that, a is 1, then we just look for the factors of c that add up to b. So we think about 18, and we think about, okay, is it 1 times 18? Is it 2 times 9? Is it 3 times 6? Well, it's 3 times 6, and so we just say x plus 6 and x plus 3. So that is one way to factor, is when a is equal to 1, it's pretty easy. Then we have a situation where a and c are prime. So if we look at this example, and I said they're prime, and 6 is not prime, is it? Well, we can do this example anyway. It says, I guess, A, and or C. So here 2 is prime and 6 is prime. If we could factor out a GCF of 2, we should. But 13 cannot be divided by 2, so we cannot do that. When I set up my guess and check method, what I do is I put a 2x over here, and I put a 1x over here, and now I have to think of what to fill in. And my choices of what to fill in need to be either 1 and 6, or 6 and 1, or 2 and 3, or 3 and 2. And of course it has to add up to 13, but it has to add up to 13 when I distribute the whole thing. So I'm actually looking at that 6 because I'm thinking 2 times 6 is 12, and 12 is pretty darn close. So I'm going to guess and check the 6 there and the 1 there. They're all pluses. And so now if I double distribute, I get 2x squared plus 12x plus 1x plus 6. And look at that, I got the right answer. So that was a pretty easy guess and check because 2 is prime and 6 only has a couple of factors and they're all pluses. So that was a guess and check, and on the first try I got it right. If you can do that, do it. But sometimes people get stuck, they get frustrated, and they need an extra process. They want to know how to do it, not just to guess it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. For example, we have a bunch of examples here. If we look at these, we have a 5 and a 6. Well, 5 is prime, 6 is not. We have a 16 and a 6. That's going to be very difficult with the guessing and checking. 2 and 3, we should be able to guess and check that one. 5 and 12, kind of hard. This first one is easier than number 4, but number 2 especially looks really difficult. So even though I can probably do number 1 by guess and check, because it's really similar to what we just did, isn't it? But it has a 5 instead of a 2. I could do this by guess and check, but my guessing and checking might get long and tedious and I might get frustrated. So instead, I'm going to do what's called splitting the middle term, or the AC method. To do the AC method, remember that 5 is your A, 13 is your B, and negative 6 is your C. So if I come over here and find out, well, what is A times C? A times C is negative 30. Do you see 5 times negative 6? Now that I have that, I want to decide what my factors are. Well, I could have negative 1 and 30, or 30 and negative 1. Negative 2 and 15, or 15 and negative 2. Negative 3 and 10, or 10 and negative 3. 4 does not go in, 5 does, negative 5 and 6, or 6 and negative 5, and then we're going to start going the other way. So I just have to remember that there are the positive and the negative possibilities on all of these, okay? What I'm looking for is very similar to what I was looking for before, and what I'm looking for is what adds up to 13, positive 13. So look at my list, which one of these would add up to a positive 13? Well, negative 2 and positive 5. So here's what I'm going to do. This is where we split the middle term, as I'm going to go to that 13 and I'm going to split it up. So I'm going to rewrite number 1, starting with 5x squared. Now, the 13 I'm going to break up, and what am I going to break it up into? Negative 2 and positive 15. So I have a negative 2x plus 15x minus 6. Now take a look at that and make sure you understand that what I wrote down in green is exactly the same as what is in here in the typed part of it. Okay, we just would add like terms. Negative 2x plus 15x would add up to 13x. So it's the exact same thing. I just rewrote it. And the reason that I rewrote it was so that now I can regroup it. So I'm going to put parentheses around these. And you just go in whatever order. And I should also say that a minute ago when I wrote that down in green, I could have put the 15 first and the minus 2 second. It does not matter which order you go in. It all pretty magically works out. Okay, so if I group these, I'm just grouping the first two together and the second two together. That's it. Now I'm going to factor out the GCF of these parentheses and the GCF of these parentheses. So in the first set, the only thing I could factor out would be an x. In the second set, I could factor out a 3. Okay, look what happened. And this is what is supposed to happen. This term and this term are exactly the same. That's what's supposed to happen. Make sure you get that. If you get to this step and that doesn't happen, you've done something wrong. So I have it where it worked out the way it's supposed to. Excellent. The next thing I need to do is I really have two separate items here where I can like factor out the 5x minus 2 out of each set. In other words, if I pull out the 5x minus 2 out of the first term, then I'm left over with an x. And then I have a plus in the middle. And if I factor out the 5x minus 2 out of the second one, I have a 3 left over. Some people don't really know what I mean by factoring out, so let's take a look. If I just took this 5x minus 2 as like one big chunk of information, I could essentially distribute it. And I would distribute it and I would get 5x minus 2 times x plus 5x minus 2 times 3. And that's what I have up in the step up above. So all I did was I factored out my 5x minus 2. Okay, so now I have my answer. I'm done. I have my 5x minus 2 and I have my x plus 3. That is the factored form. We are done. I should also say, in your answer, it doesn't matter which one comes first. The x plus 3 could come first, or the 5x minus 2 could come first. Let's look at number 2. This was the one that we said looked really big and ugly. And there is a way to make it a little bit less big and ugly. Can you see if there's a GCF? Let's divide this whole thing, divide by 2. And so when I divide it by 2, I get 8x squared minus 10x minus 3. Now it appears a little bit less intimidating, a little bit lower numbers, a little bit easier to do. Okay, so let's take our AC from this. So our AC is 8 times negative 3, which is negative 24. Now, from that AC, we need to decide what adds up to negative 10. Well, is it 1 and 24? No, probably not. Is it negative 2 and 12? Or negative 3 and 8, or negative 4 and 6. We've already come up with it, right? Do you see it? It's going to be actually not negative 2 and positive 12, but because we have a negative down here, it's going to be negative 12 and positive 2. I'm going to rewrite this, and I'm going to come down here a little bit to rewrite it. So I am going to break up that negative 10x. And so I have 8x squared minus 12x plus 2x minus 3. So do you see what I did here? Remember we had this negative 12 and positive negative 2 and positive 12, but we decided really what we need is we need a positive 2 and a negative 12. So we put the positive 2 and the negative 12, because negative 10x is the same as negative 12x plus 2x. We split the middle term. That's called splitting the middle term. The next thing that we do is we group the first two together and the second two together. We look for a GCF. In my first set of parentheses, I can factor out a 4x, and that leaves me with 2x minus 3. In my second parentheses, there's nothing to pull out. Do you see that? Neither one of those have a GCF. However, lucky for us, it matches. Do you see that? That it matches the 2x minus 3 and the 2x minus 3. Now, let's go one more step. The next step is that we look at these two and we kind of think of it as, is there a GCF we could factor out? What's common? Remember common factor, greatest common factor? The commonness is the 2x minus 3. And if I factor out 2x minus 3, what do I have left? Well, I have a 4x. Is that all? No, it's not all. Because remember, we are supposed to check it by distributing. Well, if we distributed it, there would be nothing left over here. What do we need? We need a 1. Now, if we distribute this, we get 2x minus 3 times 4x, which is what we have here, 2x minus 3 times 1, which is what we have here. Now, we do need to be careful in our answer because we are pretty much done here. The only thing is, do you remember a minute ago that we factored out that 2? We need to make sure we put that 2 in our solution. So now, if we went back and did all of this distributing over again, we would get 16x squared minus 20x minus 6. I'm going to come over here to the side and I'm going to show you some of the instructions. I'm just going to take that box away and have you pause the video here and write down these steps into your notes. It's a lot to remember, and for people who are decent at factoring, you'll remember it okay. But for those of us who need some help, you probably need to go ahead and copy these down. So pause the video and write this stuff down. Okay, now that you have gotten a chance to write all that down, hopefully those steps make sense to you. Of course, we will work on it in class tomorrow, but let's go ahead and factor number 3 and number 4. I left those for you because those are ones that you, I think, should be able to do. Number 3, you might be able to do by guess and check. And you know what? If you can do guess and check, do guess and check. You don't have to go through the whole thing. Number 4, I think you're going to need to do the splitting the middle term or the AC method. So first of all, let's pause again and work out number 3. Okay, I kind of cheated on number 3 because for me that was an easy guess and check, but I'm good at guessing and checking because I've been doing this a while. But let me just tell you what I did. I started off with the 2x squared and I knew my only possibilities were 2x and x, so I filled those in first. Then I went to my 3 and I knew it had to be either negative 1 and positive 3 or negative 3 and positive 1. I just didn't know which one was negative, and I just didn't know which spot each one went into. But I knew I needed a 5 here. Still tricky though, because I could see how you would think the 3 would go in that one as well. But what we get here when we put it this way, with the negative 3 over here and the positive 1 on this side, is we multiply and we get negative 6x plus 1x, and so this works. Now, you might have done splitting the middle term, and you should have gotten the same answer. Remember, you can also have the answer written the other way. That is, if you write it the other way, it would look like this. Both of these answers mean the exact same thing. Either one of them is correct. Both of them are correct. But for me, that was a guess and check. You might have done it the other way. Let's do the last problem. Again, pause it here and work this one out. When we come back, I'll show you how I did it using splitting the middle term, because I know a lot of you will like splitting the middle term. Okay, let's see how you did on number 4. Here is the solution worked out. I'm going to talk it through. I multiplied a times c to get negative 60. I list out my factors. Now, I will say I knew I was looking for negative 4, which is a pretty small number. And so I didn't choose 1 and 60 or 2 and 30, because in my head, I already knew 1 and 60 was going to be too big, 2 and 30 was going to be too big. So I just started with 3 and went from there. So I have 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you can stop at any point. Like once you realize, oh, I've got it, you can stop there. I stopped at negative 610, not because I found it, although that is the correct combination, but because the next one was 7 doesn't go in, 8 doesn't go in, 9 doesn't go in. Now I'm back to 10, and I already did 10. What I'm going to choose for my combination is this combination. The only difference is I need to make this a positive 6 and a negative 10 because it is a negative 4. And so that's what I did. I came up here, I split my negative 4x, I split it into a negative 10x and a positive 6x. Then I grouped the first two together and I grouped the second two together. In the first group, a 5x factors out. Factor out my 5x, left with x minus 2. Second group, factor out the 6. I have 6 times x minus 2. Then my common factor is x minus 2. It showed up both places, so I have x minus 2. My other one is 5x plus 6. Now, I will also say you might have come up with a different combination. But if you did that, in other words, what you might have done is put your positive 6x over here and your negative 10x over here. If you had a positive 6x and a minus 10x, then what you would have is you would have an x factoring out of this one and a minus 2 factoring out of this one, and then you have your 5x plus 6 in the leftovers. And so you would have the same thing, you would just have it in the different order, and that's okay. This is, like I said, AC method or splitting the middle term method. If you are bad at guess and check, then this is what you should use. Over in the margin, if you write this stuff down, those are the steps that you need. There are millions of videos on the internet. If you want to see someone else working out these problems, just go to the internet and Google factoring by AC method or factoring by splitting the middle term, and you will find other explanations. The only other thing I want you to do right now is write down a summary. Write down 2 or 3 things that are kind of hints to yourself of what you need to remember from this lesson today. And then tomorrow in class, we will work on splitting the middle term in class.